You've seen it before. Someone enters a room and without a word, they change the atmosphere. The way people shift slightly, the subtle pull of attention, the invisible currents of influence, they respond to this person almost instinctively. You might have asked yourself, how do they do it? How can someone seem to understand the room, the people in it, without ever speaking? It's not magic. It's not intuition alone. It's something far more tangible, far more trainable. It's the ability to read people, the art of seeing beneath the surface without judgment, of perceiving intentions, emotional states, and tendencies with clarity and calm. This is not about control. This is not about manipulation. It's about understanding human behavior ethically and with the precision of a strategist and the patience of someone who has learned to observe before acting. Imagine walking into your next meeting, your next social gathering, or even a casual conversation with a sense of quiet clarity. You notice the small details, the fleeting expressions, the tension in someone's shoulders, the rhythm of their voice, the micro shifts in posture. You sense discomfort before it's verbalized. You perceive confidence even when it's subtle. You recognize patterns in behavior that others overlook. And you do it without imposing, without forcing, without attempting to dominate. What you are cultivating is a heightened awareness, an ethical insight into human behavior. You're learning to read signals that most people ignore or misinterpret. And here's the key. The people you observe are not puzzles to be solved. They are not opponents. They are mirrors, reflecting patterns, desires, vulnerabilities, and tendencies. And by learning to read them carefully, you improve not only your ability to communicate and connect, but also your own self-awareness. You see yourself more clearly, your reactions, your biases, your blind spots. Many people believe that reading others is an innate talent, something you either have or you don't. They assume the charismatic leaders, the negotiators, the influencers, all just feel things that others cannot. The truth is more encouraging. These abilities can be learned, practiced, refined. Like any skill, they require observation, discipline, and ethical grounding. And the mastery lies not in guessing the future, but in understanding probabilities. What someone is likely to feel, how they are likely to respond. To how a situation tends to evolve when guided with awareness. You do not need to be manipulative to be effective. Strategic clarity is not about bending others to your will. It's about seeing clearly, responding appropriately, and navigating interactions with precision. It's the difference between reacting blindly and acting with deliberate insight. It's knowing when to speak, when to listen, when to pause, and when to observe further. It's the subtle power that comes from understanding human dynamics deeply while remaining ethically grounded. Think about the last time you misread someone. Perhaps you assumed hostility where none existed, or perhaps you trusted too quickly and felt disappointment. These are the costs of absent awareness, small, almost imperceptible mistakes that accumulate over time. But imagine the opposite. A life in which your understanding of others is nuanced, your social intuition honed, your judgment informed by subtle observation rather than assumption. This is not about perfection. It is about increasing the likelihood of clarity, reducing missteps, and building relationships that are both honest and effective. Mastering the ability to read people starts with a shift inward. You cannot understand others without understanding yourself first. Awareness of your own emotional triggers, patterns of judgment, and habitual assumptions creates a stable lens through which to observe the world. Without this foundation, even the sharpest observation can be distorted, filtered through projection or bias. Calm authority emerges from this self-awareness, out a quiet confidence that allows you to engage with others without tension or neediness. Every interaction becomes data, not in a cold, analytical way, but as living insight. The slight lift of an eyebrow, the pause before a reply, the subtle change in posture, the micro-expressions that flicker and vanish in an instant. All of these are threads. And like a master strategist, you begin to see the weave of the conversation, the underlying currents, the unspoken messages that guide behavior. You don't exploit them, you understand them. You use that understanding to communicate more effectively, to connect more authentically, to influence ethically when the situation calls for it. This skill is not flashy, it is quiet, it does not demand attention, yet those who cultivate it often find that they command the room anyway. Why people sense the presence of someone who sees clearly, listens deeply, and responds with measured insight. They trust without needing to be persuaded, they open up without needing to be coaxed, and they respond positively because the interaction feels attuned rather than forced. Reading people is as much about timing as it is about observation. Strategic clarity requires patience, the discipline to notice, to wait, to let patterns emerge. It is tempting to jump to conclusions, to act on the first impression, but mastery lies in resisting that impulse, in tolerating uncertainty long enough to see behavior unfold. And with each interaction, your internal map of human behavior becomes more detailed, more reliable, more nuanced. Ethical mastery of this skill also demands restraint. Just because you can perceive tendencies does not mean you should interfere. Just because you notice discomfort does not mean you should intrude. You learn to balance insight with respect, understanding with patience, observation with integrity. The greatest communicators, the most persuasive negotiators, the leaders who inspire loyalty, all operate within this subtle balance. They understand without exploiting, guide without coercing, influence without manipulating. By now you might be asking, where do I start? How do I develop this ability? How do I become a person who reads others with strategic clarity and calm authority? The answer begins with attention. You must train yourself to notice without judgment, to see patterns without jumping to conclusions, to interpret behavior with nuance. You must cultivate emotional regulation, so your reactions do not cloud your observations. You must reflect on past interactions to identify misread cues and refine your understanding. And above all, you must maintain ethical grounding, ensuring that your insight serves mutual understanding, connection, and responsible influence rather than self-interest alone. The journey of learning to read people like a master strategist is not a quick one. It is subtle, iterative, and layered. You will make mistakes. You will misinterpret signals. You will feel uncertain at times. But each experience adds to your skill. Each observation refines your lens. Each interaction strengthens your capacity to understand without judgment, to respond without coercion, and to communicate with clarity and presence. And as you progress, you begin to notice the changes. Conversations flow more smoothly, or misunderstandings decrease. Influence is gained not by force, but by presence. You are no longer simply reacting to the world. You are engaging with it consciously, deliberately, and ethically. You see the room before you enter it. You sense the currents before they swell, and you navigate interactions with a calm authority that is unmistakable, even if unspoken. This is the promise of reading people strategically. Not control, not manipulation, not certainty, but clarity, insight, ethical influence, and refined communication. It is a skill that improves with patience, observation, and disciplined reflection. And it is a skill that transforms the way you experience every human interaction, allowing you to move through the world with awareness, calm, and quiet power. The ability to read people is not reserved for a select few. It is a skill you can cultivate, refine, and master over time. It begins with observation, continues with reflection, and deepens with ethical application. And as you develop it, you will find that understanding others is inseparable from understanding yourself, and that true strategic clarity comes not from domination, but from disciplined insight, presence, and integrity. Now, take a breath and prepare yourself. What you are about to learn goes beyond surface-level tricks or manipulative tactics. It is a disciplined approach to perception, to understanding human behavior, and to navigating life's interactions with clarity, ethical awareness, and calm power. Every principle, every example, every story you will encounter in this audiobook is designed to sharpen your insight, refine your perception, and equip you with the tools to read people like a master strategist, without ever crossing the line into manipulation or suspicion. This is the threshold. Beyond it lies a deeper understanding of human behavior, subtle patterns of communication, and the disciplined practice of observation that can transform the way you relate to the world. Step forward with focus, patience, and ethical intent. You are about to begin the journey toward strategic clarity in human interaction, the foundation of observation. The first step in mastering the art of reading people is understanding that every human interaction is a layered signal. Every word spoken, every glance exchanged, every movement made carries information, some obvious, some subtle. Most people skim the surface. They hear words but miss the nuances, see faces but overlook micro-expressions, assume meaning but rarely pause to verify. If you want to move beyond the average perception, you must train yourself to notice with precision, to observe with intent, and to interpret with disciplined patience. Observation begins with presence. Too many of us live partially distracted, scanning social media, rehearsing replies, or lost in thought. In these moments, the signals of others pass unnoticed. To read people effectively, you must anchor yourself in the moment, and your senses must be active, your mind calm. There is a difference between looking and seeing, between hearing and listening. The person across from you is offering data continuously. A slight hesitation before speaking, a subtle tightening of the jaw, a shift in posture. Each gesture is a window into their current state. To perceive these, you must first eliminate internal noise, but observation alone is insufficient. Without understanding context, signals can be misleading. A slouched posture might indicate fatigue, not disinterest. A brief glance away may signal thoughtfulness rather than deception. Mastery begins when you combine attention with discernment. You notice patterns over time, rather than jumping to conclusions from a single moment. You track behavior, not just appearance. This is the essence of strategic clarity, seeing without rushing, interpreting without bias, and responding without assumption. Let's pause and consider the micro-expressions. These are fleeting facial movements that often reveal underlying emotions. A twitch at the corner of the mouth, a brief lift of the eyebrows, a subtle tightening around the eyes. These moments last milliseconds, yet they can communicate more than words ever could. The skilled observer notices these not to exploit them, but to gain ethical insight. They tell you how someone is reacting internally, which can guide your communication and understanding. You begin to see patterns in how emotions manifest, which allows you to anticipate potential reactions without assuming certainty. Tone and rhythm of speech are equally revealing. The cadence, volume, and inflection of someone's voice provide clues to emotional state. A measured, steady tone often signals composure or confidence. A rushed, clipped delivery can indicate tension or discomfort. Pauses, hesitations, or repetitions are all signals. By listening with intention, you begin to understand not just the content of what is said, but the emotional undercurrent that drives it. You become attuned to discrepancies between words and delivery, not as a judge, but as an observer seeking clarity. Body language is another critical layer. Posture, gestures, spatial orientation, and subtle movements communicate more consistently than verbal language. A person leaning slightly forward often indicates engagement or interest. Crossing arms can indicate defensiveness, or it may simply be a comfortable stance. Feet and leg movements reveal unconscious responses more reliably than deliberate gestures. The master strategist observes patterns across multiple cues rather than relying on single indicators. They notice what repeats, what shifts, and how it correlates with context. Now, attention to detail is vital, but equally important is emotional calibration. And if you notice tension in someone, your first impulse should not be to react emotionally. Instead, you train your mind to observe calmly, interpret accurately, and act deliberately. Emotional control allows you to process information clearly without distortion. It prevents projection, misreading someone based on your own mood, expectations, or fears. The disciplined mind absorbs data, evaluates probability, and responds strategically. Observation is not passive. It requires active mental engagement. You are constructing an internal map of human behavior, a dynamic chart that updates with each interaction. Every nuance you perceive adds a layer of depth. Over time, you recognize trends, how certain gestures align with emotional states, how speech patterns shift under stress, how micro-expressions predict reactions. You are not predicting with certainty, you are increasing the likelihood of understanding and responding appropriately. Ethical clarity is the guiding principle throughout this process. This skill is not about manipulation or deception, it is about responsible influence and deeper awareness. Understanding someone's emotional state or tendencies is powerful, but only when used to communicate more effectively, resolve conflicts, and foster connection. Strategic insight does not require exploitation, it requires integrity. And integrity ensures that every interaction strengthens trust rather than erodes it. Pattern recognition is a natural next step. Humans are creatures of habit. Even in the chaos of emotion or stress, patterns emerge. The person who consistently avoids eye contact when uncomfortable, and the one who gestures while emphasizing key points, the individual whose tone rises when frustrated, all provide recurring signals. Recognizing these patterns requires repeated observation, reflective thinking, and patient verification. Each pattern you identify improves your ability to read others accurately, ethically, and consistently. Let's explore subtle inconsistencies. When someone's words and non-verbal cues diverge, this signals a misalignment, not necessarily deception, but a point worth noting. Perhaps they are uncertain, conflicted, or masking discomfort. By observing these mismatches, you gain insight into internal states without needing to force revelation. You learn to interpret probabilities rather than assume facts, which increases both your clarity and your ethical responsibility in interaction. The most critical aspect of observation is patience. Quick judgments are often flawed judgments. A single smile, a fleeting glance, or an isolated gesture cannot define a person's intent. Mastery involves observing sequences over time, noting consistency, shifts, and contextual alignment. You are not seeking instant answers. You are constructing a comprehensive understanding, gradually building a reliable framework for perception. Patience ensures your insights are accurate, nuanced, and ethically grounded. Self-awareness remains central. The more you understand your own reactions, biases, and tendencies, the less they distort your perception of others. Emotional triggers can create blind spots. Assumptions can warp interpretation. The strategist continually monitors their own mental and emotional state while observing. But this dual awareness of self and others creates the calm clarity required for precise insight. You become both observer and analyst, grounded in reality rather than assumption. Observation also extends to context. People do not exist in isolation. Environmental cues, group dynamics, cultural norms, and situational pressures all influence behavior. Mastering the skill of reading people involves integrating these factors. A person's posture may change in a crowded room versus a one-on-one conversation. Speech patterns shift under stress. Understanding the interaction between behavior and context enhances your ability to interpret signals accurately and ethically. Active listening enhances observation. Listening is not simply waiting for your turn to speak. It is a disciplined practice of absorbing words, tone, emotion, and intent. But when someone speaks, your attention captures more than content. It captures hesitation, emphasis, and subtle signals of agreement or resistance. By listening actively, you increase the probability of understanding, deepen connection, and demonstrate respect. Active listening is simultaneously an ethical practice and a tool for insight. Finally, synthesis is the bridge between observation and application. Noticing signals is only useful when integrated into understanding. You combine micro-expressions, tone, posture, context, and verbal content to form an informed perspective. This synthesis informs communication strategy, emotional calibration, and relational decisions. You act not from impulse, but from calculated awareness. Your decisions and responses are guided by insight rather than guesswork, by probabilities rather than absolutes, and by ethics rather than expedience. As you practice observation, you begin to notice subtle layers of human behavior previously invisible. You recognize stress before it manifests overtly. You sense hesitation without words. You interpret enthusiasm and disinterest in ways that enhance clarity and connection. Each interaction becomes a classroom, each person a teacher, each observation a lesson in human psychology, ethics, and strategic clarity. The foundation of reading people is built on this triad: presence, observation, and reflection. Presence anchors your awareness in the moment. Observation gathers the signals others unconsciously reveal. Reflection processes, interprets, and integrates these signals into actionable insight. With patience and ethical grounding, this triad becomes the bedrock of strategic clarity, increasing your ability to navigate human interactions with calm, power, and integrity. Mastery begins not with techniques or tricks, but with deliberate attention to the smallest details. Your eyes, ears, and mind must be attuned to subtle shifts in behavior. You learn to notice patterns, interpret probabilities, and integrate context. You cultivate emotional regulation, self-awareness, and ethical clarity. And through consistent practice, observation becomes instinctive, judgment becomes calibrated, and communication becomes precise. In time, you develop the quiet authority of someone who understands human behavior deeply, not by guessing or imposing, but by seeing clearly, interpreting accurately, and responding ethically. The mastery of reading people begins here, with disciplined observation, ethical awareness, and the patient construction of insight. It is subtle, it is powerful, and it transforms the way you interact, influence, and connect with the world. The psychology behind human behavior. To read people effectively, you must understand not only the signals they emit, but also the psychological frameworks that guide their behavior. Every human action, no matter how subtle, emerges from a combination of motives, experiences, and internal patterns. To interpret behavior accurately, we begin with awareness of these underlying forces. This is not about guessing or labeling, it's about cultivating insight into the tendencies that shape human responses. Human behavior is often habitual. From daily routines to communication styles, much of what people do is reinforced by repetition. Habits form because they reduce cognitive load. They allow the brain to operate efficiently without constant deliberation. Recognizing these patterns in others increases the probability that you will interpret signals correctly. For example, the person who consistently gestures while speaking may do so out of comfort or expression, not necessarily emphasis. The observer's task is to identify what is habitual versus what is context-dependent. This distinction is critical for accurate perception. Cognitive biases play a central role in shaping behavior. Everyone has them, and they influence perception, judgment, and decision-making. Anchoring bias, confirmation bias, and social conformity tendencies, among others, can subtly alter how a person communicates or responds. Understanding these biases does not grant control, but it allows you to anticipate potential blind spots in others' perception. For instance, someone anchored to an initial impression may resist new information, leading to predictable verbal and non-verbal cues. Recognizing these tendencies enhances your ability to interpret behavior ethically and strategically. Emotions are the undercurrent of human interaction. They drive reactions, shape choices, and influence communication far more than words alone. Yet emotions are often expressed indirectly, through posture, facial micro-movements, voice inflection, or timing of responses. Reading these subtle cues requires both attention and reflection. A brief tightening of the lips, a sudden shift in weight, a micro-frown, each can indicate discomfort, stress, or contemplation. Over time, patterns emerge. The skilled observer does not judge these cues. They note them as data points that improve the probability of understanding. Stress is particularly revealing. Humans under stress often display consistent physiological and behavioral changes. Elevated pitch, quicker speech, increased fidgeting, or avoidance of eye contact may appear. But interpretation must consider context. Stress can be situational rather than personal. It might result from external pressures, environmental factors, or temporal constraints. Recognizing the difference between transient situational stress and longer-term behavioral tendencies refines your capacity to interpret human behavior with accuracy and ethical grounding. Motivations are another lens for interpretation. People act to satisfy needs, desires, and goals, both conscious and unconscious. These motivations shape communication, influence decision-making, and manifest in subtle patterns. Some individuals seek social approval, others prioritize autonomy, and still others are driven by achievement. Recognizing these tendencies increases the likelihood of understanding intent and anticipating responses. Again, this is not about prediction with certainty. It is about probabilistic insight grounded in observation and reflection. Social dynamics also play a profound role. Humans are relational creatures, influenced by hierarchy, group norms, and interpersonal histories. The presence of others changes behavior, often in predictable ways. Someone may express confidence in one-on-one conversation but exhibit deference or caution in a group setting. The skilled observer notes these shifts, understanding that behavior is situationally adaptive rather than fixed. By attending to context, you refine your perception of individual tendencies and group dynamics simultaneously. Cultural factors further shape human behavior. Norms, communication styles, and expectations vary across social and cultural contexts. A gesture considered polite in one environment may be interpreted differently elsewhere. Voice modulation, personal space, and eye contact are all influenced by cultural conditioning. To read people effectively, one must remain sensitive to these influences, integrating them into the observational framework without judgment. This awareness increases clarity, minimizes misinterpretation, and enhances ethical engagement. The concept of emotional resonance is also central. Humans naturally mirror or respond to the emotional energy of others. A calm, measured presence can induce stability in interactions, whereas heightened tension may provoke defensiveness. Recognizing this dynamic allows you to observe without imposing, to influence ethically, and to communicate with awareness. Emotional resonance is not manipulation, it is ethical attunement. You respond to the energy present, not to an imagined state or assumed intention. Decision-making patterns provide further insight. People display tendencies in how they evaluate options, respond to risk, and weigh social considerations. Some are analytical, pausing to deliberate and seeking information. Others are intuitive, acting quickly based on past experiences or internal heuristics. Observing these tendencies allows you to anticipate likely responses, adapt your communication style, and maintain ethical alignment. The goal is not to manipulate outcomes, but to interact with understanding and strategic clarity. Subtle behavioral cues often reveal internal states that are otherwise unspoken. Eye movement, vocal tone, micro-expressions, and physical spacing are all informative. However, single cues are unreliable without context. True insight emerges from the integration of multiple signals over time. By noting convergence across verbal and non-verbal channels, you increase the probability of accurate interpretation. This disciplined attention to detail separates the skilled observer from the casual perceiver. Empathy is not about absorbing another's emotion or assuming knowledge of their experience. It is about calibrated perception, understanding likely emotional states, tendencies, and responses without imposing assumptions. Empathy enhances ethical communication. It allows you to recognize discomfort, align interaction appropriately, and respond in ways that foster clarity and mutual understanding. Ethical insight arises when perception informs respectful, effective engagement rather than personal advantage. Human behavior is often paradoxical. Contradictions, inconsistencies, and dualities are common. Someone may claim confidence but display hesitation. They may express openness yet physically distance themselves. Recognizing these contradictions without judgment is a hallmark of strategic clarity. You do not label them as deceptive. You note patterns, consider context, and adjust interpretation accordingly. The master strategist observes, synthesizes, and responds ethically, and always aware that complexity is inherent to human nature. Memory and experience influence behavior significantly. Past interactions, traumas, achievements, and learning shape responses, often unconsciously. A person who has faced repeated criticism may respond cautiously to feedback. Someone accustomed to public attention may exude confidence under scrutiny. Observing how historical patterns manifest in present behavior improves your ability to interpret signals probabilistically rather than assuming certainty. Ethical perception depends on integrating this context without judgment or exploitation. Habituation and adaptation also occur within interactions themselves. People modify behavior based on feedback, social cues, or environmental change. A single conversation may reveal evolving patterns. But recognizing this adaptive capacity allows you to maintain observational clarity, update interpretations dynamically, and respond with both awareness and restraint. The skilled observer notes these shifts over time, appreciating the fluidity of behavior rather than seeking static labels. Attention to non-verbal micropatterns is critical. Subtle movements, hand placement, facial tension, gait often reveal tendencies before they are verbalized. Observing these cues increases the probability of anticipating reactions in ethically responsible ways. Yet these cues are probabilistic, not deterministic. Each signal adds context, each pattern enhances understanding, but no single movement dictates behavior. Clarity emerges from synthesis, integration, and reflection. Strategic clarity in reading people also requires reflection on your own reactions. Your interpretations are filtered through personal biases, expectations, and emotional states. Awareness of this internal lens ensures observation remains grounded in reality rather than assumption. Self-monitoring preserves calm authority, prevents projection, and maintains ethical alignment. Without self-awareness, insight becomes distorted, reducing both accuracy and ethical responsibility. Observation and psychological insight are iterative. Each interaction, each conversation, each micro-expression observed provides feedback. The skilled observer integrates new data, recalibrates perception, and refines ethical understanding. Over time, this iterative practice develops a nuanced map of human behavior, a dynamic understanding rooted in attention to reflection and ethical application. The strategist is both student and practitioner, continuously learning and adapting without imposing judgment or seeking control. Finally, understanding human psychology reinforces patience. Behavior is rarely immediate, predictable, or linear. Patterns emerge over time. Emotional responses fluctuate. Context shifts. Probabilities guide insight, but certainty is elusive. The master strategist embraces this complexity, observing without rushing, integrating without forcing, and responding with ethical clarity. Patience is not passivity, it is disciplined engagement, the willingness to absorb and interpret with calm authority. By the end of this stage, the learner begins to notice the invisible threads connecting motive, emotion, cognition, and behavior. And you start to anticipate tendencies without assuming control, to interpret patterns without judgment, and to engage ethically with clarity. You understand that behavior is influenced by a combination of habit, emotion, motivation, context, and psychological bias. Observation, reflection, and synthesis create a structured, disciplined map that guides interaction. Mastery is not about guessing. It is about observing, understanding, and responding with ethical insight. Human behavior is probabilistic, layered, and context-dependent. By grounding observation in psychological principles, you increase your probability of clarity, improve communication, and cultivate ethical influence. The foundation built here, attention, insight, and disciplined reflection, sets the stage for advanced application, deeper synthesis, key and refined strategic perception in the sections to come. Micro-expressions and nonverbal communication. The language of human behavior is largely silent. Words carry meaning, but much of what people communicate is expressed in gestures, expressions, posture, and subtle physical cues. Mastering the observation of these micro-expressions and nonverbal signals is one of the most powerful tools in the strategist's arsenal, not to manipulate, but to understand, connect, and respond ethically. Micro-expressions are brief, involuntary facial movements that reveal a person's emotional state. They occur in a fraction of a second, too fast for most people to notice consciously. A fleeting tightening of the jaw, a micro-frown, a slight lift of the eyebrows, each is a subtle clue to what someone feels internally. While these expressions are not guarantees of behavior, they increase the probability of understanding underlying emotions, which is vital in navigating interactions with clarity and ethical awareness. Consider this scenario: you are in a negotiation. Your counterpart nods and verbally agrees to terms, yet their micro-expressions reveal hesitation, a subtle tightening around the eyes, a fleeting pursing of lips. Without interpreting these cues, you might assume agreement is complete. With calibrated observation, you recognize there is internal conflict. This awareness allows you to pause, clarify, and communicate more effectively, ensuring mutual understanding rather than misalignment. The goal is never to exploit hesitation, but to ethically guide interaction toward clarity and alignment. Eye posture and body orientation are equally revealing. People convey openness, defensiveness, interest, or disinterest through the way they position themselves. A forward lean can indicate engagement. A subtle withdrawal may signal discomfort or reservation. Arms crossed across the chest can denote defensiveness, or it could simply be comfort. The skilled observer evaluates patterns over time rather than assuming meaning from a single gesture. Multiple signals combined, gesture, expression, tone, create a more reliable picture of internal state. Hand movements provide additional context. Gestures often accompany thought processes, emphasizing points, indicating pacing, or revealing emotional energy. A person tapping their fingers may be impatient or anxious. Hands pressed together could indicate contemplation or restraint. Yet observing these patterns in combination with facial expressions, tone, and context allows you to interpret behavior with higher clarity. Ethical interpretation ensures that insight informs communication and connection rather than manipulation. Eye contact is perhaps one of the most subtle and influential non-verbal signals. Humans rely on gaze to communicate attention, interest, confidence, and emotional state. Direct eye contact can convey engagement and openness, while avoidance may suggest discomfort, distraction, or reflection. The master strategist notes changes in eye behavior over time rather than relying on a single instance. A fleeting glance away is not judgment. A sustained shift in gaze pattern over multiple interactions often provides probabilistic insight into emotional or cognitive state. Proxemics, the study of personal space, also reveals unspoken information. Distance maintained between individuals communicates comfort levels, authority dynamics, and relational boundaries. Leaning too close may be perceived as intrusion. Maintaining distance may signal caution or detachment. Context shapes interpretation. A crowded environment alters spacing norms. Observing shifts in proxemics helps you adapt communication ethically, aligning interaction with comfort and situational awareness. Vocal tonality is another critical dimension. Beyond the words spoken, tone conveys emotion, intention, and emphasis. A calm, steady tone suggests composure. A higher pitch may indicate tension or excitement. Speech rhythm, pauses, repetitions, and hesitations provides insight into processing, stress, or uncertainty. Listening attentively allows you to integrate vocal cues with micro-expressions and body language, forming a more holistic understanding of internal states. Subtle behavioral mirroring is an often overlooked signal. Humans unconsciously mimic postures, gestures, and speech patterns when comfortable or engaged. Observing when someone mirrors your behavior or posture can provide insight into rapport, receptiveness, and relational alignment. Again, ethical awareness guides interpretation. Mirroring is not a tool to exploit, but a signal that the interaction is proceeding harmoniously and your communication is likely being received with clarity. Timing and rhythm of movement provide additional insight. The pace at which someone speaks, gestures, or moves reflects internal energy and emotional state. Rapid movements may indicate stress, excitement, or urgency. Slower, deliberate actions may signal calm, control, or thoughtfulness. Skilled observers integrate these temporal cues into a broader understanding of human behavior. Contextual awareness ensures accurate interpretation and ethical application. Facial micro-patterns and asymmetries also convey subtle emotional information. One side of the face may reveal tension before the other, indicating initial emotional response. These cues are probabilistic, not absolute. Observing multiple micro-patterns across interactions increases accuracy and deepens understanding. Ethical observers note these signals to guide communication with clarity, empathy, and respect. Gestural clusters provide more reliable insight than isolated movements. One gesture alone may be meaningless, but a combination, hand gestures, facial micro-expressions, body orientation, forms a coherent pattern. The strategist observes these clusters to identify emotional tendencies or cognitive processes. Over time, pattern recognition enhances probabilistic insight, increasing the likelihood of accurate interpretation while maintaining ethical engagement. Contextual consistency is crucial. Signals must be interpreted in relation to environment, culture, and social dynamics. A gesture considered aggressive in one culture may be neutral elsewhere. Postural shifts may differ in formal versus informal settings. The master strategist integrates context with observation, ensuring that interpretation is nuanced, accurate, and ethical. Misinterpretation diminishes clarity. Contextual awareness preserves it. An ethical application of micro-expression observation emphasizes communication rather than exploitation. Recognizing tension, discomfort, or hesitation allows for thoughtful adjustment in dialogue. You can clarify points, pause for reflection, or provide space, improving mutual understanding without coercion. Insight enhances interaction, creating connection and alignment rather than manipulating outcomes. Observation also requires calibration of your own presence. Your posture, tone, and attentional focus influence the interaction. Emotional resonance between individuals shapes micro-behavioral signals. A calm, attentive observer encourages openness and clarity, whereas tension or distraction can distort the signals you perceive. Maintaining self-awareness ensures that observation remains grounded and ethically aligned. The integration of verbal and nonverbal communication is essential. Words provide content, nonverbal cues provide context, emotional tone, and intent. Discrepancies between these layers are informative, revealing potential internal conflict, uncertainty, or emphasis. The strategist synthesizes these signals, recognizing that meaning emerges from alignment across verbal and nonverbal channels, not from isolated cues. Micro-expressions and nonverbal cues are probabilistic, not deterministic. They increase the likelihood of accurate interpretation but do not guarantee certainty. Ethical mastery arises when observation informs communication and connection responsibly. You recognize trends, integrate context, and adapt responses in ways that enhance mutual understanding without imposing control or judgment. Repeated observation builds intuitive pattern recognition. Over time, you notice consistent microsignals associated with emotional states, stress responses, and communication tendencies. This is not instinctive guessing, it is disciplined observation and reflection. Each interaction contributes to a growing internal framework, improving clarity, insight, and ethical responsiveness. Patience remains central. Micro-expressions are fleeting, and non-verbal cues are subtle. Rushing to conclusions or reacting impulsively diminishes accuracy. The master strategist observes sequences, identifies clusters of cues, and integrates them into a probabilistic understanding over time. Patience ensures insight is nuanced, reliable, and ethically applied. Self-reflection reinforces mastery. After interactions, reviewing observed micro-expressions, gestures, and non-verbal patterns strengthens recognition and interpretation. You refine attention, adjust biases, and validate ethical application. Observation is iterative. Each interaction informs the next, creating a continuous cycle of learning, insight, and ethical application. The skilled observer learns to perceive without over-analyzing, to notice without imposing, and to interpret without assuming certainty. This balance between attention and restraint is the foundation of ethical clarity. You increase the likelihood of understanding others while maintaining integrity, presence, and calm authority. Ultimately, micro-expressions and non-verbal communication are windows into the human experience. They reveal emotion, intention, and response tendencies in ways that words alone cannot. By observing, synthesizing, and ethically applying these signals, you gain strategic clarity, not through control but through insight, presence, and ethical responsiveness. As your observational skill deepens, you begin to see interactions as dynamic systems rather than isolated moments. Each gesture, expression, and tonal shift is part of a larger narrative. Ethical insight allows you to navigate this narrative, responding appropriately, fostering clarity, and maintaining alignment between perception and communication. The mastery of micro-expressions and non-verbal communication is not a secret technique. It is a disciplined practice grounded in observation, context, reflection, and ethical awareness. The strategist integrates these layers to increase understanding, guide communication, and cultivate connection with clarity and calm authority. Behavioral patterns and predictive insight. As you deepen your understanding of human behavior, the next step is recognizing and interpreting patterns. Patterns are the repeating threads that emerge from speech, posture, gesture, and emotion. They are the natural tendencies that guide behavior over time. Observing patterns does not grant certainty, but it increases the likelihood of understanding, helps you navigate interactions with clarity, and sharpens your ethical insight into human dynamics. Patterns are often subtle, emerging across multiple interactions. A colleague may consistently pause before responding to feedback, revealing a reflective nature. A friend may always cross their arms in discussions, indicating habitual caution rather than opposition. Observing these tendencies over time allows you to interpret behavior more reliably, distinguishing between transient reactions and consistent traits. Pattern recognition is a discipline of patience, requiring multiple data points before drawing conclusions. Micro-patterns are particularly revealing. Micro-patterns are sequences of behavior that recur consistently in specific contexts. For example, someone might glance downward when recalling sensitive information or shift their weight subtly when uncomfortable. Each signal on its own may be ambiguous. Observed collectively, they form clusters that suggest tendencies or states. By tracking micro-patterns across time and context, you develop probabilistic insight, an understanding that increases the likelihood of interpreting responses accurately without asserting certainty. Understanding these patterns requires awareness of triggers. Human behavior often responds predictably to certain stimuli: stress, praise, challenge, or social pressure. By observing reactions to these triggers, you gain insight into behavioral tendencies. Consider a teammate who becomes unusually reserved when asked to speak in public. This is a pattern triggered by social pressure. Recognizing triggers allows you to interpret behavior in context, adapt communication ethically, and respond with clarity rather than assumption. Consistency across interactions strengthens reliability. When behaviors repeat across diverse contexts, they are more likely reflective of underlying tendencies. The person who gestures enthusiastically while speaking in both one-on-one conversations and group settings demonstrates a habitual communicative style. Patterns that emerge in varied circumstances increase the probability that your interpretation of behavior is accurate, grounding your understanding in observation rather than assumption. Conversely, deviations from patterns are informative. When someone acts outside of their usual behavior, it signals a potential shift in emotion, priority, or attention. Perhaps a quiet team member suddenly contributes assertively, indicating a heightened emotional state or interest. These anomalies provide insight into temporary conditions, but ethical observation ensures you interpret them probabilistically rather than as absolute indicators. You notice trends without jumping to conclusions. Behavioral patterns also reveal interpersonal dynamics. How someone adjusts their behavior in the presence of certain people reflects social adaptation. And they may become more reserved with authority figures, more open with peers, or more assertive in specific settings. Observing these relational patterns enhances your understanding of both individual tendencies and social context, providing clarity without manipulation. Strategic insight here is about awareness, not dominance. Emotional patterns are another layer. Individuals often display recurring emotional responses to specific situations. Some may become anxious under uncertainty, others energized by challenge, still others disengaged by conflict. Observing these emotional tendencies allows you to anticipate probable reactions and adapt communication accordingly, always within ethical boundaries. Recognizing emotional rhythms enhances clarity in interactions and supports balanced responses. Speech patterns provide a similarly rich source of insight. Vocabulary choices, sentence structure, pace, and tone often follow habitual trends. Some people are precise and deliberate, others spontaneous and fluid. These patterns reveal cognitive styles, communication preferences, and potential areas of focus or sensitivity. By noting these tendencies, you can tailor interactions to improve mutual understanding without influencing or exploiting behavior. Observing how patterns cluster across multiple dimensions is particularly powerful. Micro-expressions, gestures, tone, and context combine to form complex behavioral constellations. The strategist integrates these signals, recognizing that insight emerges from synthesis rather than isolated cues. Probabilistic interpretation ensures accuracy while maintaining ethical integrity. You are reading behavior, not predicting it with certainty. Anticipating behavior probabilistically is about understanding likelihoods, not dictating outcomes. Recognizing that someone tends to become guarded in new social settings does not guarantee resistance. It increases the chance that they may respond cautiously. Ethical insight comes from awareness of tendencies and responsible adaptation, not coercion or manipulation. You adjust communication to align with observation, preserving clarity and integrity. Patterns also illuminate decision-making tendencies. Some individuals deliberate extensively while others respond quickly. Some are influenced by social consensus, others by personal analysis. Recognizing these decision patterns enhances your ability to anticipate responses, adapt interaction style, and foster clarity without forcing outcomes. Observing decision-making trends is a probabilistic tool, reinforcing ethical insight. Subtle cues often reinforce these patterns. Gestures, micro-expressions, eye movement, posture, and tone may repeatedly align with specific tendencies. Observing convergence across multiple behavioral channels strengthens reliability. Over time, repeated observation creates a mental map of probable tendencies, a guide, not a rulebook. You navigate interactions with awareness, patience, and ethical clarity rather than assumption or control. Ethical application of pattern recognition requires constant self-awareness. Your interpretation is always filtered through your own biases and assumptions. Reflection ensures that observation is grounded, minimizing projection. By maintaining disciplined self-monitoring, you preserve the integrity of your insight, ensuring that probabilistic interpretation guides ethical communication rather than personal agenda. Behavioral patterns evolve over time. Habits, emotional responses, and decision tendencies can shift with experience, context, or changing priorities. Recognizing the fluidity of patterns ensures flexibility. You do not cling to outdated assumptions but continuously integrate new observations, refining probabilistic insight. The strategist understands that clarity emerges from ongoing observation, reflection, and adaptation. Pattern recognition enhances strategic interaction. You anticipate likely responses, align communication, and navigate relational dynamics with ethical precision. You are not predicting with certainty, you are increasing the probability of understanding as reducing misalignment and improving clarity. Ethical mastery lies in using insight responsibly, fostering connection, and enhancing mutual comprehension. Training in pattern observation involves structured practice. Observe multiple interactions over time, note recurring cues, integrate context, and track probable tendencies. Review and reflect. Over time, this disciplined attention enhances awareness, strengthens recognition of micro-patterns, and deepens probabilistic insight. Observation becomes second nature, guiding ethical communication and strategic clarity. Behavioral clusters, the intersection of repeated patterns across multiple dimensions, reveal richer insight. Micro-expressions, tone, gesture, and posture form predictive constellations. For example, a slight tightening of the lips and combined with a brief downward gaze and folded arms may indicate hesitation in a discussion. Observed repeatedly, this cluster strengthens the likelihood of interpretation while maintaining ethical responsibility. Pattern recognition is iterative. You observe, interpret, reflect, and recalibrate continuously. Each interaction informs the next, creating a dynamic understanding of human behavior. Insight is probabilistic, grounded in observation, and enhanced by reflection. Ethical clarity ensures that interpretation is applied responsibly, guiding communication, fostering connection, and increasing awareness without manipulation. Recognizing patterns also supports emotional calibration. Understanding typical behavioral tendencies helps you regulate your own responses. When you anticipate likely reactions based on observed patterns, you remain composed, measured, and aligned. Emotional regulation preserves calm authority and ensures that insight is applied ethically rather than reactively. Patterns are probabilistic guides, not guarantees. The disciplined strategist interprets trends, synthesizes multiple signals, and adjusts interaction ethically. You cultivate awareness of tendencies, respecting autonomy, fostering clarity, and maintaining integrity. Insight is informed, adaptive, and responsible, grounded in observation and reflection rather than assumption or coercion. Observation of patterns across social dynamics reveals relational tendencies. Some individuals consistently defer to authority, others assert influence among peers. Noticing these trends enhances awareness of interpersonal navigation without imposing control. The ethical insight emphasizes understanding and alignment rather than manipulation or dominance. Finally, the strategist integrates pattern recognition with all previous layers: micro-expressions, non-verbal cues, psychological tendencies, context, and ethical awareness. Observation, synthesis, reflection, and ethical application combine to create a probabilistic framework for understanding human behavior. Clarity emerges from disciplined attention, ethical reflection, and repeated practice. Behavioral patterns are the roadmap for strategic insight. They allow you to navigate human interaction with probabilistic understanding, calm authority, and ethical precision. Mastery lies not in control, prediction, or manipulation, but in observation, reflection, and ethical responsiveness. Each interaction provides additional data, and each observation strengthens insight, and each reflection refines your ethical application. The journey toward mastery in reading people advances through understanding patterns, probable, context-dependent, and ethically interpreted. By integrating observation, psychological insight, micro-expressions, and behavioral trends, you develop strategic clarity. You navigate human interaction not through certainty, but through increased awareness, measured insight, and responsible engagement. This section lays the foundation for applying patterns in communication, decision-making, and social navigation. Observation and reflection are iterative, probabilistic, and ethically grounded. Behavioral patterns integrated with psychological understanding form the framework for interacting with clarity, calm authority, and integrity, ethical influence, and strategic communication. Reading people is only part of mastery. The next step is translating observation into ethical, effective communication. This is not about manipulation or control. It is about understanding tendencies, emotional states, and behavioral patterns to communicate with clarity, presence, and integrity. Strategic communication emerges from insight, patience, and ethical awareness. Every interaction carries an unspoken rhythm. When you observe, you are tuning into this rhythm, the subtle ebb and flow of energy, attention, and emotional state. Ethical communication involves aligning with this rhythm without imposing, persuading without coercing, and influencing without exploiting. The goal is mutual understanding, clarity, and resonance. Insight without ethical application is inert. Communication without observation is imprecise. The combination, however, creates a subtle, quiet power. The first principle is alignment. Observing tendencies allows you to adjust your approach while remaining authentic. If someone is reflective and deliberate, rapid-fire communication may overwhelm them. If someone is expressive and energetic, slow, monotone delivery may disengage them. Aligning your communication with observed patterns increases the likelihood that your message will be received clearly, reducing friction and enhancing understanding. Tone, cadence, and pace are central tools. Beyond words, these elements convey presence, empathy, and composure. Matching rhythm to context and observation signals awareness and attentiveness. When someone is tense, a calm, measured tone helps reduce escalation. When someone is energetic, a slightly brisker tempo fosters engagement. The strategic communicator observes and adjusts, enhancing connection without manipulation. Language choice is another layer. Words carry both denotation and connotation. Observing how someone responds to certain terminology, framing, or phrasing allows you to select language that enhances clarity. This is not about persuasion in the manipulative sense, it is about ethical framing. You use insight to communicate more effectively, ensuring comprehension, alignment, and shared understanding. Listening is equally critical. Active listening is not passive, it is a disciplined practice of observation, reflection, and ethical response. Paying attention to tone, micro-expressions, and behavioral cues while someone speaks allows you to respond appropriately. Reflecting back key points, on pausing for clarification, and validating emotions builds trust and enhances mutual understanding. Strategic communication is as much about listening as it is about speaking. Pause and timing amplify impact. Observed tendencies reveal when to speak, when to pause, and when to allow reflection. Interrupting a thoughtful communicator may obscure clarity. Rushing a cautious individual may create resistance. Observing timing cues in behavior, gestures, and tone allows you to calibrate communication, creating resonance without exerting dominance. Empathy and calibration are inseparable from ethical communication. Empathy is not absorbing another's emotion or assuming complete understanding. It is probabilistic perception, understanding tendencies, probable reactions, and likely emotional states. Neat calibration involves adjusting responses to align with observed patterns ethically. Together, empathy and calibration enhance clarity, reduce miscommunication, and foster trust. Framing is subtle but powerful. The way information is presented affects perception and reception. Observed behavioral tendencies indicate which frames are most effective. A reflective individual may respond better to structured reasoning. An expressive communicator may resonate with narrative and metaphor. Ethical framing uses insight to clarify, not to manipulate. Communication becomes a tool for understanding, not dominance. Non-verbal alignment enhances credibility. Posture, gesture, and micro-expression synchronization subtly reinforce engagement and presence. Ethical observers align non-verbal cues to complement, not override, the conversation. A mirroring is not mimicry for manipulation. It is calibrated attunement that enhances mutual comprehension. The person you are interacting with feels heard, understood, and respected. Feedback must be strategically delivered. Observed patterns indicate how feedback is likely to be received. Some individuals respond well to direct statements, others require careful phrasing, positive reinforcement, or gradual disclosure. Ethical communication ensures that insight informs delivery without coercion or exploitation. Feedback is guided by clarity and presence, not power or dominance. Questions are instruments of insight and connection. Open-ended questions invite reflection and provide additional behavioral signals. Observing how someone responds, pauses, phrasing, emotional tone adds depth to your understanding. Strategic questioning enhances comprehension, encourages self-expression, and maintains ethical engagement. Questions are used to facilitate clarity, not to manipulate outcomes. Conflict navigation benefits from observed insight. Understanding emotional tendencies, habitual responses, and relational dynamics allows you to approach disagreement with composure and clarity. You anticipate probable reactions, adapt tone and phrasing, and preserve mutual respect. Ethical influence emerges from awareness and calibrated communication, not from coercion or intimidation. Managing your own presence is as vital as observing others. Composure, measured energy, and attention amplify influence ethically. Those who maintain calm authority communicate credibility without imposing, but emotional regulation ensures responses are deliberate rather than reactive, and ethical clarity preserves trust and alignment in all interactions. Subtle reinforcement increases alignment. Noticing micro-agreements, slight nods, or mirroring behavior can inform pacing and phrasing. Ethical reinforcement is about attuning to the interaction, enhancing clarity, and fostering comprehension rather than exerting influence over decision-making. The objective is understanding, not control. Probabilistic insight informs strategic choice. Observation of patterns, tendencies, and microbehavioral cues guides communication decisions. You anticipate likely reactions, adjust phrasing, and maintain ethical engagement. Influence is the natural byproduct of clarity, attunement, and presence, not coercion, manipulation, or dominance. Ethical influence requires reflection. After each interaction, consider your use of observed insight. Did you respect boundaries? Did you enhance clarity? Did you maintain integrity? Reflection reinforces ethical practice, ensuring that observational insight translates into responsible communication rather than exploitation. Over time, ethical strategic communication creates trust, alignment, and clarity. People respond positively not because they are manipulated, but because they perceive awareness, understanding, and presence. Ethical influence is subtle, probabilistic, and mutually beneficial. You enhance comprehension and connection without infringing on autonomy. The disciplined communicator integrates multiple dimensions: verbal content, non-verbal cues, behavioral patterns, context, and probabilistic insight. Each element informs timing, phrasing, and tone. Together, these layers create a framework for communication that is precise, ethical, and effective. Insight guides action, ethical grounding ensures responsible application. Strategic communication thrives on observation and adaptation. Patterns emerge, tendencies reveal themselves, and micro-behaviors provide ongoing feedback. Ethical observers use this information to refine approach, align interaction, and enhance understanding. Communication is a continuous process of awareness, adjustment, and reflection. Subtle repetition strengthens retention and comprehension. Reiterating key points, emphasizing critical cues, and aligning phrasing with observed tendencies enhances clarity. Ethical repetition reinforces understanding without coercion, by ensuring the listener grasps intended messages while preserving autonomy and trust. Influence emerges as a byproduct of clarity, empathy, and ethical observation. You are not imposing outcomes, but guiding understanding. People respond positively because interaction is attuned, respectful, and aligned with observed tendencies. Strategic clarity increases the probability of mutual comprehension while maintaining integrity. Observation, pattern recognition, and calibrated communication combine to create ethical influence. Insight informs approach, reflection ensures alignment, adaptation maintains presence. This triad allows you to navigate complex interactions with calm authority, clarity, and probabilistic understanding. Influence arises naturally when perception and communication are integrated ethically. Conflict resolution and negotiation exemplify the application of ethical influence. By observing behavioral patterns, emotional tendencies, and micro-signals, you anticipate likely responses, adjust phrasing, and maintain alignment. Outcomes are guided by clarity, empathy, and respect, rather than manipulation or coercion. Strategic communication transforms potential friction into constructive dialogue. Communication extends beyond words. Presence, posture, gesture, tone, timing, and alignment create a probabilistic map of understanding. Ethical application ensures that insight enhances connection rather than control. You navigate human interaction with calm authority, probabilistic awareness, and responsibility. Influence emerges organically when insight is applied ethically. Strategic communication is iterative. Each interaction provides feedback that informs future observation and adjustment. You refine pattern recognition, calibrate responses, and maintain ethical alignment. Over time, this disciplined practice strengthens both insight and communication, producing consistent clarity, presence, and probabilistic understanding. Finally, ethical influence is the culmination of observation, insight, pattern recognition, and self-awareness. Mastery is not about control or manipulation. It is about increasing the likelihood of understanding, enhancing clarity, and fostering mutually beneficial interaction. Insight guides communication. Ethical awareness ensures integrity. Presence amplifies impact. Together, they create the quiet, powerful authority of the master strategist, integrating insight, observation, and strategy. By now, I think you have explored the foundations of observation, the psychology behind behavior, micro-expressions, pattern recognition, and ethical influence. Section 6 brings all of these threads together. True mastery comes from integration, the ability to synthesize what you see, hear, and sense into probabilistic insight, ethical action, and strategic clarity. Integration begins with presence. Observing others is not an isolated skill, it is inseparable from your own state of mind. Calm awareness allows you to notice subtle signals, interpret them without distortion, and respond with intentionality. Your emotional regulation, focus, and self-awareness are as critical as your knowledge of behavioral cues. Without presence, insight becomes fragmented and strategy becomes reactive rather than deliberate. The first step in integration is constructing an internal map of human behavior. This map is not rigid, it is dynamic, probabilistic, and layered. Every person you interact with represents a unique constellation of habits, tendencies, emotional patterns, and situational responses. By combining observation of micro-expressions, verbal cues, non-verbal gestures, and historical behavioral patterns, you create a multidimensional understanding of that individual. This map is not about prediction with certainty. It increases the likelihood of accurate interpretation and informed ethical response. Synthesis requires attention to multiple channels simultaneously. Facial expressions, posture, tone of voice, and speech, content form interdependent signals. Observing them in isolation may lead to misinterpretation. Integration demands seeing the relationships between signals, how a brief frown coincides with a shift in posture, how hesitations align with gestures, and how repeated behavioral patterns emerge across contexts. By combining these layers, insight becomes actionable while remaining ethically grounded. Contextual awareness is a key pillar of integration. Signals do not exist in a vacuum. Environment, social dynamics, cultural norms, and situational pressures shape behavior. A gesture that signals discomfort in one context may be neutral in another. Integrating context ensures that your interpretation of observed behavior is both accurate and ethically responsible. Probabilistic insight thrives when it accounts for these external factors. Integration also requires reflection. The observation and insight alone are insufficient if not processed thoughtfully. After each interaction, reflect on observed patterns, probable tendencies, and your own responses. Did your interpretations align with outcomes? Did you respond ethically? Reflection reinforces learning, strengthens pattern recognition, and hones probabilistic judgment. This iterative cycle, observe, integrate, reflect, builds the disciplined competence of the master strategist. Ethical calibration is essential. Insight must never become a tool for coercion, manipulation, or exploitation. Integration ensures that understanding guides communication responsibly. If you observe hesitation, tension, or discomfort, your response should respect autonomy while fostering clarity. Integration is about amplifying understanding, enhancing connection, and improving alignment, not asserting control. Ethical integrity preserves trust and long-term influence. Strategic application of integrated insight involves timing, phrasing, and adjustment. Observed behavioral patterns guide your choice of when to speak, how to respond, and which communication strategies to employ. Timing enhances clarity and receptivity, increasing the probability that your message is received as intended. Strategic adjustment allows interaction to unfold with minimal friction, maintaining calm authority and ethical alignment. Complex interactions require multi-layered observation. In group dynamics, each individual's behavior interacts with others, producing cascading effects. Integration allows you to observe relational patterns, micro-signals, and emotional shifts simultaneously. By synthesizing these factors, you can maintain clarity, anticipate probable reactions, and communicate with ethical precision. The master strategist is never overwhelmed. Insight is systematically layered and applied with calm control. Pattern synthesis is another essential skill. Recognizing repeated behaviors over time increases predictive reliability while preserving probabilistic humility. For example, if an individual consistently responds to high-pressure situations with caution and deliberation, you can anticipate probable behavior in similar scenarios. Yet integration emphasizes that these tendencies are not guarantees, they are guides. Your response is informed, not predetermined, ensuring ethical application. Emotional integration is equally vital. At observing someone's emotional patterns alongside their verbal and non-verbal signals provides insight into probable internal states. Integrating your own emotional regulation ensures that responses remain measured. You do not react impulsively, you respond deliberately. This dual integration of others' tendencies and your own composure creates strategic clarity, presence, and ethical influence. Communication benefits immensely from integrated insight. By combining behavioral observation, psychological understanding, and ethical awareness, you craft messages that resonate, clarify, and align. You anticipate probable responses and adjust phrasing, tone, and pacing to maximize comprehension without infringing on autonomy. Strategic communication becomes a natural extension of ethical insight, and the iterative nature of integration cannot be overstated. Every interaction provides feedback. Signals that appeared significant may prove contextually specific. Patterns may evolve over time. Reflection and recalibration are constant. Mastery is not a static achievement but an ongoing process of observation, integration, ethical application, and adjustment. Probabilistic insight grows stronger with practice, patience, and disciplined awareness. Subtlety is a hallmark of mastery. Integrated insight is rarely obvious to others. You observe, synthesize, and respond with calm authority. Your presence influences interactions quietly, increasing alignment and clarity. The strategist does not need to assert dominance. Influence emerges naturally from awareness, integration, and ethical application. And his subtlety preserves trust while enhancing effectiveness. Integration also involves ethical anticipation. By synthesizing behavioral tendencies and context, you can anticipate likely needs, reactions, and misunderstandings. This anticipation is probabilistic, not deterministic. It allows you to navigate potential friction points, clarify communication, and foster understanding without exerting undue influence. Ethical anticipation strengthens strategic clarity and relational alignment. Self-monitoring remains central. Integration requires awareness of your own biases, assumptions, and emotional states. Your interpretation of patterns and signals is filtered through your internal lens. By observing your own reactions and adjusting for bias, you maintain clarity and ethical integrity. Integration is as much about understanding yourself as it is about understanding others. Complexity is inherent to human behavior. No single cue, pattern, or psychological insight provides absolute certainty. Mastery comes from synthesizing multiple dimensions: observation, micro-expression analysis, behavioral patterns, context, emotional insight, and ethical reflection into a coherent, probabilistic framework. You navigate uncertainty with calm, measured awareness, increasing the likelihood of accurate understanding without overstepping ethical boundaries. Ethical application of integrated insight strengthens relationships. Individuals respond positively to awareness, attunement, and presence. Trust is enhanced because interaction is guided by understanding rather than assumption or coercion. Alignment emerges naturally when your perception informs communication ethically, enhancing clarity, connection, and relational stability. Integration also prepares you for adaptive strategy. Human behavior is dynamic. Patterns shift, emotions fluctuate, and context evolves. By continuously synthesizing new observations with existing insight, you remain flexible, responsive, and aligned. Adaptation is grounded in probabilistic understanding, not reactive impulse. Ethical adaptability is a hallmark of the master strategist. Strategic mastery is iterative, ethical, and probabilistic. Observation informs insight, insight informs communication, communication generates feedback, feedback refines observation. Integration is the central loop that links these elements into a continuous, disciplined cycle. Mastery emerges from sustained practice, reflection, and ethical application rather than shortcut techniques. Finally, integration fosters quiet authority. When observation, insight, patterns recognition, and strategic communication are combined ethically, you develop presence that is respected without coercion, clarity that is trusted without force, and influence that emerges naturally without manipulation. You navigate human interaction with calm power, ethical clarity, and probabilistic understanding. This section concludes the technical exploration of mastering human observation and ethical application. Integration is the capstone skill, synthesizing all prior insights into a coherent framework for understanding, communicating, and interacting with strategic clarity. Probabilistic insight, ethical responsibility, and calm authority form the foundation of long-term mastery. The next stage is to consolidate this understanding into actionable daily practice. Observation becomes continuous, reflection becomes routine, and ethical communication becomes instinctive. Through disciplined integration, you cultivate the quiet power of the strategist, present, perceptive, and ethically aligned. Mastery is not about control, certainty, or manipulation. It is about awareness, presence, and responsible application of insight in human interactions. Mastery as a way of being. You have journeyed through observation, psychology, micro-expressions, behavioral patterns, ethical influence, and the integration of insight. You have explored the architecture of human behavior layer by layer and learned to navigate it without judgment, without manipulation, and without assumption. Now, the final lesson is about how all of this becomes a way of being, a subtle, quiet mastery that extends far beyond technique. Mastery begins with presence, It is not about observing to predict or control. It is about observing to understand, to connect, and to respond with clarity and integrity. Presence allows you to perceive nuances that others overlook. A slight hesitation, a fleeting expression, a shift in posture. These signals emerge in the gaps of conversation. The disciplined observer notices them not to exploit but to comprehend, to communicate more effectively, and to cultivate trust. Presence is the lens through which all other skills gain depth. Observation alone is insufficient without reflection. Each interaction becomes a mirror, revealing both the other person's tendencies and your own. Reflect on what you notice: patterns, micro-expressions, behavioral clusters, and emotional rhythms. Consider your internal responses: bias, expectation, or projection. Reflection ensures that insight is not misapplied. It keeps you grounded, ethical, and aware. Mastery is not about knowing everything. It is about continuously refining perception and judgment. Ethical insight is the foundation of all strategic understanding. When you interpret behavior, you must do so probabilistically, recognizing that humans are complex, adaptive, and context-dependent. You do not predict with certainty, nor do you impose your will. Instead, you use insight to communicate clearly, act responsibly, and foster mutual understanding. Ethical awareness transforms observation into influence that is subtle, principled, and lasting. Team integration is where mastery truly emerges. All the tools you have cultivated, psychological understanding, pattern recognition, micro-expression analysis, and ethical communication, coalesce into a coherent framework. This framework allows you to anticipate probable tendencies, adjust your communication, and maintain composure under complexity. It is probabilistic, not deterministic, adaptive, not rigid, ethical, not exploitative. Integration creates calm authority, quiet influence, and strategic clarity. Behavioral mastery also requires patience. Patterns reveal themselves gradually, micro-expressions flicker in milliseconds, and emotional rhythms shift with context. To observe without rushing, to interpret without assumption, and to respond without impulse is the art of patience. Mastery is iterative. Observe, synthesize, reflect, add and recalibrate. The strategist understands that clarity grows over time, and that ethical application deepens with practice. Self-awareness is inseparable from mastery. The better you know yourself, the clearer your perception of others becomes. Your internal biases, assumptions, emotional states, and habitual reactions all shape interpretation. By monitoring and regulating these internal processes, you ensure that observation remains accurate, reflection remains grounded, and communication remains ethical. Self-mastery and mastery of perception are intertwined. They feed and refine one another continuously. Strategic clarity emerges naturally from integrated insight. You see connections, detect subtle trends, and notice potential friction points before they escalate. This is not power over others. It is power within yourself. The ability to navigate complexity with calm authority and ethical precision. You respond deliberately rather than react impulsively. You communicate to clarify rather than to manipulate. This is the hallmark of the master strategist. The quiet influence you develop through ethical observation and strategic communication manifests in subtle ways. People trust your clarity, resonate with your presence, and align naturally with your guidance. This influence is probabilistic and earned, not forced. It grows from consistency, integrity, and attentiveness. The strategist does not demand attention or obedience. Influence is a natural byproduct of ethical perception, insight, and composure. Human behavior is inherently complex, layered, and adaptive. Mastery does not simplify this complexity, it respects it. Until you learn to interpret probabilistic tendencies, not absolutes, You recognize patterns without labeling people. You integrate context, observation, and reflection to guide communication ethically. Mastery is the ability to navigate this complexity with calm awareness, measured judgment, and consistent integrity. Every interaction becomes a laboratory for learning. Observe attentively, reflect honestly, adjust consciously. Each conversation, gesture, and micro-expression provides data for your internal map of human behavior. This iterative cycle deepens insight, refines judgment, and enhances ethical communication. Mastery is cumulative. Insight grows stronger with each thoughtful observation, each calibrated interaction, and each reflective pause. Emotional attunement is essential. You are not absorbing or controlling emotions. You are perceiving them with probabilistic clarity and responding with ethical alignment. Noticing subtle shifts in tone, posture, or expression allows you to adapt your communication, maintain clarity, and foster trust. Emotional attunement increases understanding while preserving autonomy and integrity. Mastery also requires humility. No framework, technique, or observation grants certainty. Humans are unpredictable, adaptive, and contextually complex. Recognizing the limits of insight ensures ethical application. Humility prevents arrogance and overconfidence, creating space for continued observation, learning, and growth. Mastery thrives in balance, confidence tempered with restraint, insight tempered with ethical awareness. The cumulative effect of these practices is presence, clarity, and quiet authority. You become someone who sees deeply, responds ethically, and communicates strategically. You influence probabilistically, respecting autonomy while guiding understanding. You navigate complexity without imposition, fostering alignment, comprehension, and relational harmony. This is the essence of ethical mastery. Finally, mastery is a continuous journey, not a destination. Observation, reflection, integration, and ethical application are lifelong disciplines. Each interaction provides new insight. Each pattern observed refines judgment. Each reflective pause enhances awareness. Over time, these disciplines coalesce into an enduring capacity to read, understand, and communicate with both clarity and integrity. Embrace mastery as a way of being, not merely a set of skills. Presence, ethical insight, strategic clarity, and probabilistic understanding become habitual. You navigate human complexity with calm authority, measured awareness, and principled communication. The knowledge you have gained is not a tool for control, it is a framework for understanding, aligning, and connecting ethically. Mastery, in its purest form, is quiet. It does not announce itself. It is evident in composure under pressure, in attuned observation, in measured response, and in ethical clarity. Those who have learned to read people like a master strategist carry an invisible authority, a presence that influences through awareness, understanding, and integrity rather than coercion. You now hold a framework for navigating human interaction with calm, ethical, and probabilistic insight. The principles you have absorbed, observation, reflection, pattern recognition, some micro-expression analysis, ethical communication, and integration are not rules, but guides. Applied responsibly, they increase the likelihood of understanding, clarity, and alignment. Applied without ethics, they lose value. Mastery is inseparable from integrity. Carry these principles forward, observe attentively, reflect consciously, integrate insight ethically, communicate with clarity, empathy, and respect. Navigate complexity with patience, composure, and humility. Influence emerges naturally when presence, insight, and ethical application converge. This is the quiet, powerful authority of the master strategist, a way of being that is enduring, responsible, and universally applicable.